Chapter 11. Just admit it. It was no use. Even after we proved to Mrs. Roopy that she was dressing up as all these characters, she still wouldn't admit it. Mrs. Roopy is in denial, Andrea said when we got back to the classroom. I'll bet you don't know what that means, AJ. Sure, I know what the Nile means, I said. It's that river in Africa. Not the Nile, dumbhead. The Nile. It means she can't admit to herself that she has a problem. So what are we supposed to do now? Michael asked. There's only one thing we can do. We've got to tell Mr. Klutz. Mr. Klutz is the principal, which means he's like the king of the school. One time I got into trouble and sent to Mr. Klutz's office. When I got there, he didn't punish me. He gave me a candy bar. Mr. Klutz is nuts. We told Miss Daisy that we had to speak with Mr. Klutz, and that was a matter of life and death. She called the office, and in a few minutes Mr. Klutz arrived. Mr. Klutz has no hair at all. We told him all about the crazy things Mrs. Roopy has been doing and how Andrea's mother is a psychologist and she thinks Mrs. Roopy might have a big problem. We're worried about her, Emily said. This sounds pretty serious, Mr. Klutz said. Maybe we'd better go have a little chat with Mrs. Roopy. Mr. Klutz led us down the hall to the library. When we got there, Mrs. Roopy was lying on the floor under the treehouse. She was holding her head like it had been hit. Not only that, Mrs. Roopy was really fat. It looked like she has gained about 1,100,000 pounds. Oh my God. What happened, Mrs. Roopy? Michael asked. Are you okay? Mrs. Roopy, who's that? Mrs. Roopy said. My name is Humpty Dumpty. I was sitting on the wall up there and I had a great fall. Don't tell me, Andrea said. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put you back together again. Right? How did you know? You're not Humpty Dumpty, Andrea said. You're Mrs. Roopy, our librarian. Just admit it. It doesn't matter who it is, Mr. Klutz said. There has been an injury. I need to write a report and give it to the Board of Education. You can give it to me, I told Mr. Klutz. I'm Board of Education. Everybody laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. Mr. Klutz said he had to go to call a doctor for Humpty Dumpty. Mrs. Roopy got up off the floor and dusted herself off. Wait a minute, I said. I have a question. Yes, AJ? Asked Mrs. Roopy. Your name is Humpty Dumpty, right? Right. What I want to know is, why did your parents name you Humpty? I mean, if their last name was already Dumpty, they could name you John or Jim or Joe or something normal. But they had to go and name you Humpty? Well, actually, Humpty is just my nickname, Mrs. Ruby said. My real name is Lumpy. Lumpy Dumpty? I said. Yes, said Mrs. Ruby, so you can see why I'd rather be called Humpty. Andrea was getting all angry now. Mrs. Ruby was simply not going to admit she wasn't Humpty Dumpty. Nursery rhyme week is over, Mrs. Ruby, Andrea said. You can be yourself. You can stop pretending to be other people. Don't you like nursery rhymes? Asked Mrs. Ruby. Sure I do, Andrea said. But enough is enough. I hate nursery rhymes, I said. Nursery rhymes are dumb. I'm sick of nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes are boring. Mrs. Ruby looked hurt. Everything is boring to you, AJ, she said sadly. I've tried so hard to not to bore you. Please, tell me, what is not boring to you? Well, I put on my thinking cap. Well, not really, and tried real hard to think of something that wasn't boring. Trick bites, I said. Trick bites aren't boring.